All of these images came from the exact same scene, a design generated in SketchUp for iPad, but with two different AI engines looking at it. What you're about to see is a direct comparison between SketchUp for iPad's new AI render and the Nano Banana workflow we've been developing over the last few months. But before I walk through how I generated these apples-to-apples comparisons and how they might actually help you in a similar situation, let's hit rewind for a second and take a step back. So as many of you know, I'm a practicing architect who also teaches iPad drawing. So when the GC on one of our current jobs called and asked for a meeting to double-check some foundation details, I pulled out the drawings to see if we had missed something, then started preparing to meet the GC, the owners, and the steel fabricators on the site the next day. And it was while making sure I had the design loaded onto SketchUp for iPad so we could pull up the 3D model and fly around in it during the meeting that I saw SketchUp had updated their internal AI rendering program. And I'll be honest, I had never really cared for it back when they were calling it Stable Diffusion, but I thought it would be interesting to give this latest version a try and see how the workflow and the results compared to Nano Banana. So the next day we had our meeting, and by the end of the meeting everyone seemed satisfied and we were on the right track. But on my way out, I drove over to the site one more time with a very specific goal in mind: to take a photo of the foundation from each of the four corners, so I could come back to the office and precisely recreate those camera positions and build SketchUp scenes that exactly matched each view, and then use those four scenes as the image prompt component of my test. And once those scenes were made, I sat down to figure out how to make the best apples-to-apples comparison between the two rendering engines. The first part was easy. I just used what I call the default setting in SketchUp, so you can find it right here, and I used it to generate the first series of views. And I knew going in that the way I build topography, as these step 2-foot terraces following the contour lines, was probably going to be an issue for the AI. But since I wanted this to be a strict apples-to-apples comparison, I left that alone, tapped generate, and waited for the results. And the first thing to say is that, unlike Nano Banana, SketchUp always generates 3 options, and these are actually very accurate. The geometry, the windows, even the solar are all right on. It's just missing material detail, so it reads more like a different style than a finished rendering. But so far, so good. So to make this a true apples-to-apples comparison, I started a new thread in Gemini on the desktop, uploaded the exact same SketchUp scene, pasted in the exact same prompt that I had copied to my clipboard, and hit submit, and after a short wait, here's Nano Banana's version. So now we can compare them directly. They both start from the same site photo, then the SketchUp wireframe is built right over that photo, and from there, here's SketchUp for iPad's version again, and here's Nano Banana's version. And without any site information, both of these are essentially inventing the surroundings, but at the same time, they're reading the architecture very faithfully. And you could argue there's a bit more subtlety and richness in the Nano Banana version, but for now we're keeping this strictly apples to apples. So let's move on to the next test and see what happens when we ask Gemini to write what I'm calling an optimized prompt. And to do that, I took the default prompt from SketchUp, dropped it into Gemini, filled in what was missing relative to the materials and the site context, all within that 500 character limit. Then I just emailed that prompt to myself, opened it on the iPad, copied it into SketchUp's prompt field, and ran it from there. And those of you with sharp eyes will have noticed the stopwatch up here and how these SketchUp renders take about 35 to 40 seconds on average. And of course, I'm speeding that up here. But when this one comes up, there is something pretty bizarre and hallucinatory about this first one. The second one is a lot more faithful, and the third one drops a bunch of important details again, which is surprising, given that SketchUp already knows this geometry inside and out. So I'm going to go with the second one as our best effort. I've got a few theories about why it behaves this way, but for now let's move on to the Nano Banana version of what I'm calling the optimized prompt in our apples-to-apples test. So again, I start a new thread, switch to thinking mode, click Create Image, upload the exact same wireframe, and paste in the optimized prompt, which now includes a bit more about the materials and the site, still under that 500 character limit of SketchUp for iPad. And Nano Banana starts working on it, And when this one comes up, you be the judge. With the SketchUp version, we had some real struggles staying faithful to the design, which is a little surprising because with a default prompt, it actually captured the building pretty cleanly, maybe because it didn't have the site to worry about. But the site here has color, yes, but it still feels a bit generic. Whereas Nano Banana not only holds on to the design, it's picking up details all the way down to the panel joints. And even though I didn't say anything about the driveway or the walkways, it's placing them in ways that are actually useful, things I could bring back to the client as options. So I'll let you decide, but for me, Nano Banana takes this round pretty comfortably. So let's move on to what I call the universal prompt in Nano Banana. And again, I start a new thread, I load in that same image, but this time I'm using a slightly modified version of the universal prompt. I've added a note about smoothing out those stepped layers you saw in the topography, and I've also asked it to pay closer attention to the composition of the SketchUp wireframe, especially that top edge of the foundation wall. But otherwise, it works the same way. The prompt kicks off the interview, and I just move through it one piece at a time. You can study the full prompt in the download, but the short version is, the more detailed your input image gets, like when you're using a fully developed SketchUp model as a wireframe, the more careful you have to be about reminding Nano Banana to respect that geometry. It's a bit of an irony because in early concept work with a loose sketch, you can get away with very few instructions, but here precision matters, so I'm being very explicit, even repeating certain commands, like this geometric DNA lock I worked out ahead of time. But I'll be honest, even with those precautions, and even as the site representation keeps getting more accurate, you still get things like this strange little porch appendage hanging off the right side. And this is really where Nano Banana starts to separate itself from SketchUp though, because now I can just go back in, describe what's wrong, tell it to remove that, and even layer in more details, like the owner stepping out to greet a friend who's just pulled up in their red Audi Q5. But even this isn't quite right, so I add another note asking for a simple but beautiful stone walkway leading from the parking area up to the front door. And at this point, you can just keep going, making small adjustments like this and dialing it in with a surprising amount of control. So now our apples to apples comparison looks like this. We start with the site photo, then the wireframe composed to match it exactly, then SketchUp for iPad's default image, which honestly is pretty darn good, then Nano Banana's version using that same default prompt. From there, we move to SketchUp with the optimized prompt we developed in Gemini, then Nano Banana's version of that same optimized prompt, and finally, Nano Banana using the universal prompt, which lets you add a lot more detail and even shift the whole story with a single line. So you can show the building on a cold, rainy fall day, or a cozy winter evening with the lights glowing inside, or even while it's under construction on a warm spring day. And don't even get me started talking about the short videos you can create, which we'll cover in one of my next videos, so be sure to subscribe to the channel. But for now, let's revisit each of the corners and see how SketchUp and Nano Banana rose to the occasion. Site photo at southeast corner, SketchUp default, Nano Banana default, SketchUp optimized prompt, Nano Banana optimized, and the Nano Banana images we made with the universal prompt and that we shared with our clients. Here's the northeast corner, the static site photo, the SketchUp wireframe, the SketchUp default, the Nano Banana default, the SketchUp optimized prompt, the Nano Banana optimized prompt, and remember all the prompts and the final images are in the free download below. Oh, and remember those videos I promised I wouldn't talk about? Yeah, well, some of them even come with sound. Pretty incredible. And the approach to the northwest corner, the SketchUp wireframe, the SketchUp default, the Nano Banana default image, the SketchUp optimized image, the Nano Banana optimized image, and the Nano Banana universal. To learn more about using Nano Banana and staying in control of AI, whether you're working from sketches or SketchUp wireframes, check out the live Draw Along studio in the description below. It's a supportive 90-minute live session you can drop into on Wednesdays, working alongside other architects and designers, practicing sketching, refining prompts, and learning to control the output. And if you want to see the next video in this series, click here, and I will see you in the next video.